Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. I have very interesting guests who are my fellow YouTubers from Cabin Boy Needs. I have Christopher Walker here and the other guy, well, hashtag the other guy, otherwise known as Jamie Godin. Hi, guys.
Hi, how you doing?
So I want to start with the other guy hashtag. How did that started, right? Because basically, like if you go on your analytics today, you probably see that somebody watched like 60 hours of your channel. That was me. Like I've been watching it for the past week.
That was you. I was wondering who it was.
Right. That was me. So you started, Christopher, you started by yourself. Like the channel was basically all about you dyeing yarns. And then the other guy appeared. So
yes.
What made you decide to join? Like, what was that decision like?
Well, I thought I wanted to leave it to be his thing. I was just assisting, like I'll help with the wool dyeing and getting all the wool ready and all of that. And it was sort of his thing. And then he thought, well, it'd be a good idea. Maybe why don't we do it together? And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that and be a, I'm so bad because I'm not even on Instagram. We talked about this. I don't do Instagram. I barely do Facebook. I don't. So to me, it's all a bit much. And then,
well, I'll be honest. I'll be perfectly frank on this one. I was editing one of my episodes by myself, and I thought, oh my God, I'm so bored. And so I thought, how can I make this more interesting? And Jamie has a background. He's been in a bunch of movies and commercials and in front of the camera. So I thought, oh my God, I've got a resource sitting right here and he's okay to look at as well on the camera. So I thought he'd be perfect. He'd be fantastic for it. And so I'm really happy that he joined.
Well, people don't.
Was it different for you? Because like you used to being by yourself, you like holding the whole channel on your shoulders, you know the things, you know how to dye. Like, was it difficult to incorporate the two of you together?
I don't think so, because it's funny. We're just, the way we are in front of the camera is the same way we are at home. So it was kind of like, just let's sit in front of the camera and talk. And it really wasn't. I think the only thing is, trying to figure out how we're going to split up the conversation, because it's not scripted. I basically say, here are the topics. And sometimes I don't even tell them what the topics are. And then we'll get in front of the camera.
Like real life, when we go to events, sometimes I don't even know. Like even this, it was a few. He goes, "Oh yeah, we have that interview." I'm like, "What interview?" And then it's like, so it's all very to make it seem more natural. And
but I do tell you about if we're going to talk about anything historical, historical perspective on anything or sheep history or whatnot, I'll let Jamie know beforehand so that he's well prepared.
Yes, because I love history, and so when I do the history stuff, we started incorporating that, and I love learning about history. And so when we do the sheep and all of the history, I'll do some research, and we have a bunch of books on rare breed of sheep and all of that. So I'll start doing research if you let me know ahead of time. But it's sometimes the same, like one day before, and I'll just I don't even take notes, and I just write a few points, and then I just kind of memorize from what I remember reading, so it looks like I know things and it's researched. But the other guy was, because everybody knew him, and when we were going to events and stuff, everybody knew Cabin Boy Knits, and I'd been to Rhinebeck, so they're like, well, who's that other guy? Jamie is like the other guy there. And so I was the other guy, and a friend of ours, Sophie, and her friend Linda from the States, and Sophie, she's a friend, and she's a fibrist as well. And she's like, oh, you're the other guy. So we just stuck with it. Kind of like if you think, I'm just the sidekick.
Well, but you feel like a sidekick, or did you become like an integral part of the show by now?
He's an integral part of the show, so. Absolutely. And we were in Montreal in April for a festival, Knit City. We walked up to a group of women, and they turned around and they said, oh my gosh, it's the other guy. and Cabin Boy Knits. So it was quite funny.
Yeah.
Does anybody ever say like, oh, it's Jamie and the other guy?
Yes, yes, they say that as well. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, they did say that.
Yes, they did
a couple times.
I was watching that episode when you went to Montreal for that show, and it looks like it's a lot of work, because I mean, you have to dye, you have to pack, and Jamie, you did like an incredible job with packing that van. Like I've never seen anything that efficient ever. And then you have to drive there, you have to unpack, you have to organize. And Christopher, you're very specific at how you organize that yarn, because it has to be color coordinated just the right way. I mean, is that like at the end of the day worth it for you? Because you can sell online, you can market online. Like, it's all going through all that trouble worth it for you, or is it more just for the social aspect of it?
Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. It was absolutely worth it, primarily for the social piece of it. I love that. I love talking to people, meeting people, and actually watching people look at our yarn and listen to what they're saying about it, and just watching them, go through that whole process. So that was definitely worth it. And then just from a financial perspective, absolutely it was worth it. It was, a lot of people in one area, in our booth for 2 days. And so from a financial perspective, absolutely. But the biggest benefit was interacting with the people. I love talking to people, especially about fiber.
Especially for the last 2 years, as we know why, but because I only started just before that, right? Like 2019, no, 2020.
Yeah,
it's only been like
something
two,
like
just before, so yeah, so people hadn't met me so much, they just see us together. So this was probably one of the first times where now people see us after being just talking like this with you. And then so seeing and meeting real people, it was very emotional. We get emotional anyway when we talk like this, especially everyone's kind of trapped in their own world, in their own homes, in their own cities and countries even. And we talk and then it's so bizarre, and yet you feel a closeness because we're all like, it feels like a really close community. So when we went to the festival and then, oh my gosh, like real people giving us hugs, I could get emotional just thinking about it because it was very emotional. And by far, we even said in our episode, that made it worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So I've heard the rumor that like to get the most difficult colors to achieve in natural dyeing are red and black. Is that true for you?
I would say the black for sure, because black is very difficult to get. There's ways to get it. There's multiple different ways to get black, by mixing a number of colors together and overlapping the colors and re-dyeing. Red, I'm very confident that if anyone were to ask me to get any shade of red, I can do that. I've got multiple ways to do that. So, but red has been challenging for, I think in history with respect to natural dyeing, but it's all about the pH level. It's all about the water that you're using, because there's so many variables to consider when you're dyeing yarn. So I'm quite comfortable with red.
If you go back in history with red, though, red's been one of that color goes back in history like thousands of years. Mostly it's madder root. And so they're able to, I mean, that's a color that's been done since, you could find it in the ruins of Pompeii and Egyptian times. And some of the countries that when they discovered other ways to get red, which was like through cochineal, following madder, but madder goes way, way back. So it has been done for a long time, and you can get some really rich red colors.
Well, especially when you think about mixing the colors as well, and how you're mixing the colors. So yeah, so we just go to our recipe book and check it out. But again, it's the variables that really impact it. So if we're using well water in the spring, or using snow in the winter, or using well water that's been after a storm, it's all different. So we just have to look at it and tinker around with the pH level.
And some of the fibers take the color. Some of the different yarns take the color a lot stronger than others. So you might use BFL and get a really brilliant
Blue-faced Leicester.
Blue-faced Leicester. Yeah. And then if you put it on, for example, like Polwarth, it might not be as vibrant.
That's a good point. Yes.
So, but you come up with the recipe, and then you got to just have that all noted down, and you do the same thing each time to get it each time. But even then, sometimes.
And do you ever get like frustrated by the process because you basically never know what's going to happen there?
Well, we know what's going to happen, but then it's when we do every single thing the same way, and then you go, okay, this didn't turn out the same. You got to go back and do it again.
Yeah. So yes. So the answer is yes. We usually know what direction we're going in and the general color. But if you take flowers at the beginning of so lilacs, for example, are out right now. If I take those and dye with them versus if I were to dry them out and use them later on, I'm going to get a different color. Same thing with dandelions or goldenrod. It really depends on when you're picking them. So it will have an impact on the color for sure.
Yeah, and even like marigold, you get a beautiful marigold. We could use the real flowers, and same thing, or buy dried ones. And sometimes we've got the same product, and that batch, like remember the last one, we had 2 dried marigolds, And one, the yellow was so vibrant compared to the other. And I said, is that the older one or is that the newer one? And it was strange because where that came from, same thing, even in the growing season, the variables within the same, dried plant.
Let's go like a little bit back, right? So we're talking now that you've been doing all this witchery in your kitchen and like playing with the colors for quite a while. Like, what was that journey like? How did you start? What was the first batch?
I will say one thing that's been consistent from the very beginning has been the excitement. And so I'm very excited when I see a new color that comes out, but all the time some of the times you're not excited. So for example, you just mentioned, expecting a color to come out. When I first started, one of the things that I was looking for was whether or not something was going to be color fast or not. So when I went out, we've got tons of ferns out in the backyard. And so I picked the ferns and I was dyeing with the ferns and the color was amazing, but it wasn't color fast. And what I mean by that is the color doesn't stay with the yarn. And so that was a big disappointment. So I would say it was, trial and error at the beginning. I have a lot of recipe books. There's been a lot of great work done in Ontario by natural dyers and putting books together and basically on every plant that's grown around here, somebody's tested it to see whether or not it can dye, whether it's color fast, whether it's light fast. So how does it react to the sun and whether or not it's going to fade or not. So I've been using that book. My results are different sometimes than the book because again, the water is different from where I am versus where they are. And I might use a different mordant. Now mordant is the agent that binds the color to the yarn. So,
and that's important because the difference is when you go back hundreds and thousands of years, they had their recipes and a lot of them called for, they still used some heavy chemicals you wouldn't want to use today, but you can still use them today and they're relatively safe, maybe not environmentally, but chrome, for example, or if they used anything that had lead in it, back then that's what they did. And you got that really dark red and the dark black. And the black, there was a period in time where, when you think, it was always the wealthy and if you're going to get the purples and the reds, it was royalty and the wealthy, because to get those rich colors and then you have these beautiful dresses or the kings and queens with their colors, right? And then it became fashionable at one period of time, like when black became fashionable because they could now get black, and a lot of the time they'll use logwood.
Yes.
Logwood. So logwood is something they used way back when, but you can get black, which that's a purple. So you do a purple with the red and a blue, and you just do the mixture with the mordants and to get a black. So it's complicated. But when it became very popular, you think way back when everybody thought, wow, black, and people wearing the black tailcoats and black dresses, and black became very fashionable because let's say early 1800s or something, where it's like, wow, you're prominent because you're dressed in a black tuxedo or a black dress. It became very popular. So you can definitely get the black, but how do you get it without using anything chemical?
Well, so and I would say that I'm still learning. So I'm still experimenting all the time. And we have May apples just out in the back. And so I can't wait to get my hands on them because that's another way to get black. So I'm always experimenting and I'm always learning and I'm always writing down the recipes.
Well, I was watching today when you were doing the tour of the cabin and you basically were showing the living room and like the kitchen area and the staircase and some of your antiques and the fireplace. What does it look in terms of storage of all those ingredients?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. So we have a garage in the basement, and so that we keep things there, airtight in a lot of the in the garage. But we also we live in a forest, so our ingredients are on the ground of the forest oftentimes. So we wait until we need to go out and collect those. But we've also built a workshop, and the workshop has been going on for over a year, and we're very close to having it finished. So all of our stuff is going to be moving out to the workshop, and I'm really excited about that.
Have you ever like walked into the kitchen and picked up a jar and were like, what on earth is in that jar? Like, do you ever forget what you put in there?
Do you have cameras in this place?
Because in the
Yes.
the basement, one
I
shelf.
just have very vivid imagination.
Yeah, well, it's
no.
very accurate.
Because in the basement we do have shelves, and then we save some of the color, because we have jars with different colors, and you can see purple, and we have some reds, and you have some yellows, and we could still reuse them. They're still good to reuse. And then it's like, if they stayed there too and we didn't label them right away, it's, what is that?
Yeah, I've learned through the hard way that, like, I always think, oh yeah, I'll remember what this is, and then 2 weeks go by, I have no idea if it was actually
too many things.
Yeah, if it was actually the cochineal or the lac, or so we label everything, because my memory's not very good, so I need to see it. But yes, the answer is yes, that has happened. Not in the kitchen, but in our garage.
Well, that's the thing, is we've been using the kitchen over here, and sometimes we have, because we have a big counter space, so we still have our burners we could use on the counter, and you plug those in, and may as well use the stove. It's there. In the basement, we have a long table with the burners on there, and the heaters, they're electric. And then sometimes we do stuff in the fireplace, the fire pit outside, and that's fun in the wintertime.
Or we take our elements outside as well.
We've done it on the front veranda, but now the workshop, we're hoping it's good at the production will be, we'll have shelves, all of our products right there. So we're not going basement, upstairs. And the one bedroom is now, there's a lot of yarn all over the place. So it'll be nice to the workshop have the yarn. Oh, look, we can take the yarn. There's the color. There's the sinks. There's a table to work on.
Yeah.
Well, how did the business change for you? Like when you first started, right? First of all, let's go back to like, when did you decide to turn it into a business? When did it go from like hobby and just tinkering in the kitchen to like selling it?
Yeah. So there was definitely an evolution. So it started, I'd say at least 10 years ago, and Cabin Boy Knits really started with focusing on what was going on in the knitting world. There are definitely a lot of great personalities in the knitting world, especially on some of the characters in the knitting world. Some of them you've interviewed, I'm sure, which are just larger than life and wonderful and dynamic and creative. And so I thought, I was looking at that and thinking, I love knitting, and I really love this field. And so I was looking at, I've also got an art stream that I work on as well, and fiber art. And so it was really, I've always had an interest in fashion and art. And so I commented on, it was New York Fashion Week, and there was a designer, and he had a runway show. And then in his runway show, he had all of his models wearing Birkenstocks and socks. And so I sent him a note, and I just said, I didn't comment on his collection at all. I just said, I love the knitted socks and Birkenstocks. And so he was laughing at that, thought it was funny. And I just thought, wow, it's pretty interesting how easy it is to reach out to the fashion world in this way. And so I thought, we've got this log cabin. I love knitting. And why don't we put a different lens on men who knit? And so this whole Cabin Boy Knits persona came around. So it started with knitting, and it started with fiber art, and we had some shows in Toronto and in Prince Edward County. And then because we're in the forest, we had all of these ingredients around us, and I just thought, I want to take this and use this and incorporate it into to dyeing. So we started dyeing just for ourselves, and then we had private clients that were interested in us dyeing in museums and whatnot. So we worked with them, and then we just thought, what, this is going really well. I love talking to people about natural dyes, educating them on different wool bases and fibers. So I think there's an opportunity for us here to make this bigger and to start going into stores and start selling online. And so that's where we are right now in our journey.
And were you were teaching classes before
I was teaching classes. I forgot that piece. Yeah.
You were teaching classes on dyeing before we did a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Yes. And doing videos.
All over, like in Denmark and in the US and Canada.
Yeah. And at Twist, you did Twist, yes. I think even before you did the videos.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Around that same time. It's so long ago.
But the videos.
Like the fact that like you interested in natural dyes, and the fact that you interested in like rare breeds of sheep, puts you apart from the competition? Like, was that by design?
Yeah, it's really, that's an interesting question. I think that the seed was planted for the natural dyeing with my daughter and my son. They were both very interested in science and nature. And so that, and me, when I was growing up, it wasn't, I grew up in the city, like right in the city, and I wasn't exposed to all of this, but I always had an interest in it. But it was really the kids who, brought me out into the forest, and we studied everything. And so that's really what planted the seed. And then when we got here, I just thought, oh my gosh, we've got so many resources around us. So it was actually a natural evolution, but it was also, we have noticed that it does form our identity. And I think that makes us somewhat unique.
And we came up with the name early on too, because we thought,
yeah,
as soon as we were trying to think of a name together, we thought, well, the cabin, we got to talk about cabin, and the B rhymed with boy, and then we just said cabin boy, and then we said, okay, cabin boy knits, and then it went from there.
Yeah.
Well, some of the ingredients that you use, you forage in your forest around you.
Yes.
Or like you grow yourself in your garden.
Yes.
Like rhubarb, right? Or like the lilac that you just were talking about.
Yeah.
But then some of it, like the cochineals, like coming from Mexico, or like or avocado skins that you use. How do you decide, like, is color more important or the locally grown ingredients more important? Like, how do you approach the ingredients?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's really a balance, but it's color. I go after color, and then I look and see, how can we get the color? And so where is it coming from? So that's important to us. So we want to look at how it's sourced, and especially when we can't get it in our backyard. So our first objective is, what can we get from the backyard? Because it's price point's great because it's free, and I love using it. And so, like, we live in a forest that has maple trees all around, and maple trees are fantastic for us, but also oak. And the oak is brilliant because we can use the acorns, we can use the bark when it's fallen off the tree, and we can also use the leaves as well. And so those are fantastic.
And the birch.
And the birch and the goldenrod.
And
as you say, the rhubarb is up right now. It looks fantastic. But indigo, for example, we don't grow indigo here at our place. Some people do in this area, but it's a little tricky. And so it's just makes it's more efficient for us to purchase that. And cochineal, obviously, we don't have cactus pears here, so we don't harvest the cochineal. So there's things like that. But I do love color, and I want to play with color, and I want to explore what people have used in history to achieve color out of various barks and whatnot.
Yeah.
I have a very naive question. Like, when I'm thinking color, right? I'm thinking, I see marigolds, they're yellow, so the color is going to be yellow. I see lilac, so it's going to be lilac. But that's not what it's going to be. Like, the avocado doesn't turn out green, and like, it's not predictable. When you walk through that forest, now that you more experienced, right? That you have over 10 years under your belt, can you predict what the color is going to be like, or do you always have to try it to figure it out?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I do a lot of reading. So I've got the index in here. So when I look at something, I'll know what it should come out like. That doesn't mean it's going to come out that color, but I will have an understanding, a basic understanding of what it is. For example, bloodroot is up right now, and bloodroot, you have to be careful using it. I have a general idea of what it looks like, and I have used it in the past, but that was one that I wasn't quite sure of what it was going to look like. And but I know the ballpark of what it's going to do, and I can also manipulate it. I can see whether or not it's going to react by changing the pH balance. I can see whether or not the heat's going to impact it, because the heat can definitely have an impact on the color. So there's a number of things I can do to play with it, to fill around with the color and see what it comes out as. But generally speaking, I have an understanding of what the color is going to look like.
Yeah. And we use, like, for example, when we did a whole batch of yarn with oak, and it was wonderful. You knitted the hat with the oak, and just the oak alone, there was a good 5 solid clearly different shades of golden, yellow, golden beiges, and just with the oak alone. But you do know what it's going to get. And a lot of the plants, you'll get yellow. That's easy to get. Is yellow is every plant you can get yellow. But like you say, with the manipulation,
Yeah.
And either the mordant or you can add this, that, and the other to it and manipulate the color.
But there's two examples I can think of to answer your question. One of them is the white spruce. I didn't know what color that was going to be coming out. I wasn't sure. And then it actually gave us two colors. And it was because of the exposure to the heat that it went from a beigey brown color to a gray color. So it was really interesting to see that happen. Yeah. And then the cannabis leaves. So we're dyeing with cannabis leaves. And I was at Rhinebeck and I saw that one of the vendors was selling yarn and it was cannabis dye and it was a darker brown color. And so that's what I was expecting that to come out, and it came out yellow. So
we've had some.
So that's a little bit different.
Some various shades, but we can get a really, really like gold. It's the deep, richest ones were like a gold, and then paler and paler yellows. Because if you use up the dye pot to the end, you get paler and paler. But
well, not all cannabis leaves are the same. So I think that's what I learned at that exercise.
For example, the goldenrod is ultimately the goldenrod, because we've used it so often, and when you get it prime time, it's in the end of the summer, early fall, when it's at its peak, you get the brightest, best yellow with the goldenrod. It's comparable to marigold. Marigolds you can get a really bright yellow too, but I think goldenrod, would you say we've gotten the best, richest,
most vibrant?
Deepest,
I'd say vibrant,
almost fluorescent yellow. And so think about, because you're asking you're basically like, you think you're going to get red, you're going to get yellow, you're going to get blue, but then you think of like, if you use that really beautiful, beautiful yellow now, and you use that with the great blue, all the colors that you're going to get by overlapping, and you know what I mean? You're going to get a beautiful purple, a beautiful orange, because you've got that really great base of yellow.
Yeah, sorry. So one of the other things that I wanted to add was with respect to the dyeing with rhubarb leaves. The rhubarb leaves are fantastic. And it was a big surprise for me when I added alum to it. And the color came out an electric yellow. It was fantastic. It doesn't look like anything that would come from nature. It was great. And so when you add other things to it, like cochineal, or if you add indigo, you're getting a second color that is really, really fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so like when you're preparing for these shows, right, you have to bring certain amount of same colors with you. Like, how do you achieve that? Because like, do you always think of like sweater quantities for everybody? Like, do you get like 100 skeins of the same color, or is it like 3 skeins, 5 skeins, and that's it?
It depends. It really depends on whether or not it's associated with a pattern. And we try, if we're doing solids, absolutely, we try to bring sweater quantities to it, because we know people will be looking for that. We look at the weight of the yarn as well to see whether or not the time of the season as well, if they're going to be buying heavier or lighter yarns. And so it depends. But I would say we definitely try to bring sweater quantities in those colors and solid colors. And then in the multicolors, we just love dyeing those as well. So we bring a lot of those, because they sell out. People love multicolors, especially for socks. And so we bring a lot of those colors with us.
Socks and shawls.
And shawls, yeah.
So at some point, you also started doing retreats in your cabin, right? Like,
yes.
Like, was that because you first went to a retreat and you liked it, and then you decided to do it in your cabin?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we just came back from a retreat last week. But my first time at a men's knitting retreat, I had no idea what to expect. And it was amazing. It was just a phenomenal experience. Definitely had an impact on my life. And so I thought, I've got this fantastic space. We've got this fantastic space here. Why don't we be part of this and have a retreat here? So it started in New York with a guy named Joe Wilcox. He set up a men's knitting retreat like 15 years ago. It spread all through the United States, and it's in a number of areas. And we decided, it'd be a great idea to have it in Canada. So we have had 2 retreats here. We had to stop over during COVID, but we'll have another one next year. And we're going to open it up and have a couple of retreats next year.
So that was his first one, and that's like 10 years ago. So I've been hearing about it for 10 years, and I had never been. And then we planned on going, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, didn't go until I was finally, we just got back from the same one. Now it's in the countryside in upstate New York. So you think New York City, it's in the countryside. And so we just got back and I finally went after hearing about it for 10 years. And I finally went to the same one that he's been going. We've been 6-7 times. So it was pretty incredible. And yeah, so we're part of that same men's retreat. Like you mentioned on the West Coast, Colorado, they also have it in Chicago, is it Philadelphia?
Nashville.
And so we were men's knitting retreat north, and part of the same sort of circuit and the same and the same setup and all of that with workshops, and we follow that same sort of idea of how they did it.
So like when you do it at your place, is that more pressure on you? Like, are you freaking out the night before they come?
Okay, that question should be answered by this guy, because I organize it. He does all the cooking. He does all the cooking for everybody, and he does a ton of work. I just do the cerebral stuff,
He just shows up.
and he does the tough stuff. So yeah, so the first one I was wondering, how's it going to work? And Joe is definitely the guy who started it. Definitely is a very dynamic guy, and he puts on a fantastic show. So the bar is really high, and so I just thought I hope to get close to the bar on this one. But really, the people who show up just feed off each other and make it so easy for me. So that you were making all the meals, and I don't know how you did it.
I don't know how you did it.
And he won't let anybody in the kitchen either to help him. So he's doing everything.
I like to think I just do home cooked meals, and they just turn out well. And recipes from maybe my mom, my grandmother, and your uncle. Like we do just real homemade stuff. And so far with the people who have come loved it. And then when I learned how to use that fireplace right there, that oven, I had never even baked bread before, ever, not even in a real oven. And people are like, okay, in a real oven, it's challenging to do bread. But I talked to someone from the Pioneer Village nearby, and she sent me some information on how that worked. And I got it working. And then I'm like, okay, let's try bread. And
I was watching that episode when you were baking that bread, and it was like mind-blowing because first of all, you have to put the wood in, you have to, I don't even understand how that works because you have zero control. Honestly, like your whole life seems to me like it's totally zero control in everything that you do. And somehow it's like miraculously happens and like becomes brilliant,
I know, we're like, it came out of that oven, we're the same thing. We're like, oh my gosh, like it's bread and it's good and I can eat it. Like,
no, you know what? I was watching, there is a show on YouTube, it's called Real History, and they show like Victorian times, Edwardian times, it's a British show, and they show how like they take these volunteers who like real bakers, right? And they go into this Edwardian time or Victorian time village, and they have to recreate the same recipes, like following historic recipes, and like work those ovens. It was total disaster. And then I'm watching you, right? And those are professional bakers and they cannot bake bread. It's
Really?
coming raw. And then I'm watching you and you're making it look so easy. So I'm like, okay, this guy knows something.
I never thought about it so much. It's just like, you imagine, like I have this metal temperature thing that I thought I could put, because you could put it in there. And I thought I could put that in there and see if it reaches that temperature or whatever. But then you think in the old days, you just heat it up. And so it heats the brick inside. When I learned how to do it, you have to heat it up for a couple of hours so the bricks inside get really, really hot. I don't know what temperature, it's hot. And then I just put it in, and I don't know, it's worked every time. Like if it says 30 to 40 minutes, like 40 minutes is usually about right. I put it in there for the 40 minutes. I see that it's puffy, and I'm thinking, okay, it's got to be done, and it's done. And it was good.
Do you feel like this is your approach to life? Like, let's see what happens, like what can possibly go wrong?
Well, yeah, I think so. It's true, because the colors and what we do, and then, and like, when it even turning into a business that we have the show coming up, like you mentioned, and we need a lot of wool. And the last one, the one that we went to, Knit City, it was sort of, is it happening? Is it not happening? We had just had 2 big orders at stores. We didn't have any inventory. And like, oh, the show's on. And we're like, okay, we need probably good to have about 1,000 skeins of yarn. Let's aim for 400, 500. And we just went crazy. But it makes it simpler because we know what we're doing. So we did it in batches of colors, right? But because it's not specific, let's just get colors done. And we went for a minimum of like 20 each, 20 of everything or more. And we just went crazy. Next thing you know, I'm like, okay, we have 400. Then let me do a count again. Then we're up to 700. And we just did it.
The funny thing though is, we are, let's try it and see what happens kind of people. Although I would say that I'm more of a control person that wants to know outcomes or things like that, or plan. I'm a planner. However, when we're knitting, I'm the guy who, I'm happy if it's directionally correct. So I don't get fussed by making mistakes. If I have to pull out the sweater and start over again, it doesn't bother me. It's just practice. He's the total opposite. He's
like my bread.
He's
like my sweater. I changed my very first sweater, and I showed it. And we brought it to the men's knitting retreat. And these guys are, oh my gosh, they've created, they're designers. They've created patterns. They've been knitting forever and ever. I was overwhelmed by a good handful of the really top guys. And when my sweater ran around, they couldn't even believe that was my first sweater. And the stuff they were saying about it. And I changed things. I changed all kinds of things on it to make it how I wanted it.
Yeah.
So I do go that way. And same with, I'm not doing a swatch and I'm not starting over. So it has to be perfect the first time. So on one hand, it's like fly by the seat of your pants, but I have a logic to it, which maybe somebody doesn't understand. That's why we're very different that way. But like that bread, I'm like, this is going to work because if I do it this way and tweak it this way, that's probably, and then I just in my head, and then it works out. It's just a logic, I think I find. In my sweater, the same thing. He's like, Jamie, you can't do it that way. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this and I'm going to add this and that. And he's like, no. And my sweater fit perfectly and the colors all went. And even the yards, he's like, Jamie, you're using Lopi and then you're going to use the worsted for your stripe. It's not going to work. I'm like, no, that looks good. And in the sweater, we just talked about it this morning, it blended perfectly.
Perhaps you were like a knitter and a baker in your previous life.
I think so. I think so.
So like, okay, talking about previous life, I've heard your house was haunted. And there are friendly ghosts.
We talked about it. I will honestly say that I did not believe in any of this stuff. And so many things have happened in this house. It's like, I guess the most recent is I was lying in bed, had my iPad on the bedside table, and it fell on the ground. So I thought, okay, pick it up, put it back on. And I thought maybe I had the buzzer on or the vibrating on it, and it wasn't on. And then I went into the washroom, came back, it was in the middle of the floor. So I put it back again. I'm lying in bed, and the thing shoots like halfway across the room. And I just thought, oh my God. But it doesn't, I mean, I do get goosebumps when things like that happen. Like the key to the upstairs washroom rattles when there's nothing, the key lock rattles when there's nothing in it. Like there's all kinds of things like that happen. We heard people walking along the hall. Like there's just all kinds of crazy stuff.
So the very, very first weekend we spent here was when we both woke up in the middle of the night. I woke up first, I'm a light sleeper, and I was like, oh my God, there's someone coming up the stairs. There was someone, those stairs creak. The one just before the top is the loudest, and when you lift the landing, it creaks to the top. So you hear, and I'm like, someone's, and I'm thinking someone's broken in. There's someone in the house. I'm thinking, do I grab a stick? What do I grab? There's someone's coming up the stairs. Right till you heard it turn the door. And then he, by that time, woke up. I was frozen, I'm awake, sitting in bed, and I could still hear it. And then he thought I got up and went to the bathroom.
Well, I heard you. I thought it was you going to the washroom. I heard the footsteps. I heard everything. I turn over and he's sitting right there. And I'm like, oh my God, who just went to the washroom?
Just as it stopped right at the bedroom door. It stopped at the door. And I was like, and then it stopped. And it doesn't make sense. And mine goes like, that makes no sense.
And then my dad is.
Did you disclose that to the upcoming guests of your retreat? Do they know that the house is haunted?
No, we try not to tell. We don't talk about it as much anymore.
That's actually an interesting point. No, that's not in the disclosure, I don't believe. But it's happened. We had the house cleansed, which I didn't believe in either. But we had somebody come in, shaman come in, cleanse the house, and she apparently did that. But we still stuff still happens, but not as frequent.
It stopped for a couple of years. It seemed to stop for a little bit.
But the interesting thing also, it's not just the two of us. Like my dad saw somebody sitting at the side at the end of the couch one night, and like it's just we sat in the living room with a bunch of people, and
there's 5 of us.
There's 5 in the living room, and one of our baskets started shaking back and forth like this
On the table.
And we all we're just watching.
We were looking right at it. All of us were going, why is that basket is moving?
But I think whatever it is friendly. So I'm not concerned.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Sometimes it makes no sense and you just kind of go.
Yeah.
But she did say when she came though as well, the shaman, when she walked in, she even pointed out, she says, I think some like action happens here at that bathroom door, which is that, and then she said, for some reason the stairs are like, what did she say? Was like a
train station.
Like, yeah, like central station. She says there's a lot goes on the stairs and at the landing, which is interesting. She's never been in here before. She said, and then she also pointed out, she says, when you come into the house, when you walk through the door, which is this way, there's a cabin on this side and a cabin on that side. She said, when you walk in, which side do you look at when you walk in? And I said, well, I'm always looking to the left. And she said, yeah, I know, because that was where the bathroom thing was happening. So she already knew that. And why are you always drawn to look over there? Because that's where always the business was going on.
I don't know. I love the place.
And the girls who were here before said they didn't want to tell us because they were friends of friends and they had lived here for 2 years. And they said, we didn't want to say anything when you bought the place, she said, but then she started telling us the stories over here in this kitchen area and the bathroom and upstairs. So it's been going on.
Yeah,
well,
I would say
tell me about like your day. Like describe me you wake up in the morning. What's your day looks like?
Yeah, it really depends if it's during the weekday or the weekend. In the weekend, when I wake up, I have my tea. I gave up coffee a couple of years ago, which I thought I'd never do. And then we just think about, we plan out the day. What do we need to do? What do the orders look like? What kind of communication do we need to do this weekend? And then we will work on the orders and work on if it's a YouTube episode or have to get if we want to get back to customers on certain things. So that's what we work on. And then we've got the dyeing schedule set up. So we do the dyeing, and that takes place during the weekend. During the week, I have a job as well, another job. And so I'm working full time there. And then at night we're dyeing. It all depends on what our schedule looks like.
It depends on the orders if we end an upcoming show, because we've got a couple of upcoming now and a couple of orders, well, 3 or 4 orders to fill, like larger ones, and festivals coming up, 3 of them.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to gauge, because we went crazy on that Knit City yarn, so we have a good amount, but we've got 3 shows. We're going to continue with that. But yeah, and then with the episodes, it's always like, we need to do an episode. We're going to do an episode tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, what are we going to, some of the things you're going to talk about? He thinks about it ahead of time, and then he'll tell me, which I don't mind. Then I'll say, are we doing a wool? Are we doing a history of anything? And depending, like if we just come back from the knit retreat now and he bought some wool, so one of them might be something I didn't talk history about, which we don't know yet because I don't know what he bought. Well, I kind of do, but I don't know what the wool is. So he might say, okay, could you learn this history? And then I'll do research. But like I said, I like to do that very, very last minute anyway, because I think it just seems more natural that I talk about it and I have to think about it, and then I'll do a history lesson, and it's all very, and then like I said, for the episodes, we wanted to seem like just like this, we're just chatting. I don't know what you're gonna ask. He'll ask me stuff and I don't know where it's come from. So it makes it more real, and we laugh and we have a good time.
Well, do you ever feel like you got tricked into this whole world of wool and knitting?
Well, I'm like, what happened?
Like, did you envision yourself like 15 years ago that you're gonna be learning about rare ships and like knowing everything?
Never in my life. No. And this is the thing. I do remember specifically, though, I do remember because when he had been to Denmark, to Fanu, and if you Google Fanu, they were going to end the festival, but it's still ongoing. And it's a World Heritage. The island is a World Heritage site. It's so incredibly stunning, and you had been there. And so I was going to go there. And when he was saying about the whole wool thing and going to the festivals, I'm like, a wool festival? I'm like, really? Really? And then he says, yeah, they get about 10,000 people. Going like, 10,000 people are going to that island to go look at wool and knitting and products and whatever. I'm like, okay, people, get a life, get a life. What is going on here? I couldn't believe it. And so now it's like, I'm like, wow, there's a whole world out there of people who love what they do. And there's artisans. And now that I've seen and I've been to festival and I've seen met incredible people, incredible artists, designers. And just as an example, my sweater, because I go back to that because it still even blows my mind that I knit a sweater. And I'm like, I see you have something right there. It's like, it blows my mind that I started with this little thing like this, and I'm like, I have zero patience. What do you mean? I'm gonna knit a sweater. And I started to top up with the collar, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, am I gonna have this sweater in 2 years? It took a few months, but you made something so beautiful that with your own hands, it blows my mind. That sweater, I'm like, this is something I would probably go buy, and it would cost me a lot of money, but to make it.
Well, you know what? I was like surprised because I was watching the YouTube channel, right? And I was going back from the beginning, and then boom, I see Jamie organized the knit along, and I'm like, how did that happen, right? Like, because a couple episodes before, I'm watching how Jamie doesn't even knit, and then suddenly Jamie is the organizer of knit along. Like, tell me how that happened.
Okay.
Oh,
So I wanted Jamie to finish the sweater. I thought it'd be great for him to take and I thought peer pressure will work. So if you start a knit along, you've got, and I shouldn't use peer pressure, it's support, community support, community of knitters support. And so I thought, if we do this, then you're committed to finish the sweater. And I was really hoping that he would finish the sweater, and he did, which it was fantastic. But I think it was the help of the knit along that really, there was a lot of support for you on that.
But I think everyone finished the sweater before me. And then towards the end, because there was a lot of time between some of the sessions where I realized now I see other knit alongs and they plan like it's going to be this every 2 weeks or something, or once a week. And it didn't go so well that way. So there were a lot of people that stayed throughout, and then some that came in and they were done their sweaters. I wasn't even done my sweater. But I can't knit and talk. So I was like, my knitting stayed here. Because I can't make a mistake.
Did you want to go get some knitting?
So I leave it, and he's knitting, and we talk, and we're just doing it that way. And we did get into, it's interesting is we did get into, with the sweater, because I'm following the pattern, but I'm learning as I go. I can't even read a pattern. He was explaining to me how to do it as I went. And then people had a lot of feedback on what and how, and that's how we chose the sweater as well. The feedback from everyone say, what's the best sweater for a first timer? And we went with that flax sweater, and I'm knitting a second one using that basic sort of, but I'm doing everything different. So it's kind of going to be my own, but the basic ideas of that sweater with change.
I feel like I relate to you because I started knitting 5 years ago. So like I just jumped like deep, head first, and basically like learning as I go. And like you're talking about this is my fourth sweater ever.
That's incredible.
Beautiful.
Oh my gosh.
And basically like this is the second raglan sweater that I knitted. This was the first one. This
very nice. Beautiful.
This is called Whatever Sweater. So this is by Julie Knits in Paris.
Yep.
And it's basically like you just take any 2 fingering yarn that you have and you just knit it and you try it on, and it's like gauge, like what gauge, like there's 0 instructions. There's just like you try this much and like try it on, and you go, and it's like it was like super fun, but
Wow.
do you find, like I find that because I'm such a rookie in knitting, right, like there are people who knit all their life, so they know like every technique, they know like every trick, and I'm just like sort of, well, what can possibly go wrong, let me try it, right, jumping in. And I feel like these fears, like the fact that you're not afraid to try, not afraid to fail, sort of pushes you much faster, like you progress much faster than some of the people that knitted for 60 years, but they only need the same things, like, do you find the same thing about yourself?
I have never even thought about it, because I don't know if I kind of feel like you've been doing a lot of socks, and I was thinking, man, I don't know if I feel like doing socks. I feel like now I would like to knit myself another sweater. I'm in the middle of one. I started.
Well, Rhinebeck's coming up.
And I want to finish that one for Rhinebeck. And then I want to knit, I feel like I want to knit a sweater for like special people, because I don't need a whole lot of sweaters. So I want to knit like for some special people. I want to knit them sweaters. Because
Do you know what they're called?
What?
Knit-worthy people.
Knit-worthy.
Yes.
Yeah,
You guys
wanna,
competitive when it comes to knitting? Like, do you feel like you're pushing each other to like knit faster and knit more difficult?
No, not at all. Not at all. I run in the other room when Jamie's knitting the sweater. So
there's a lot of drama.
I don't think we do
Drama.
that. But I do want to just comment on the last question you were asking about people who've been knitting for years. I was teaching a class several years ago, and it was really about the history. It was a hat, and the hat was really reflecting the relationship between the Indigenous people in Canada and the Europeans. And so I get into the classroom, and I'm the youngest one in the classroom. And so that's saying something. And I would say, and these people, we went around, and all the women in the class, they were saying, they've been knitting for 40 years or, 50 years. And so I thought that was really interesting. And then one of them said that she did her master's thesis in basically Indigenous studies, with basically talking about the Europeans colonizing Canada. And so I just thought, oh gosh, well, this will be interesting. Not only am I going to be challenged by these knitters, but also by somebody who's specialized in this area. But the point of the story is that when we were doing the hat, I was teaching how to tuck the floats behind in the hat so that it's not, doesn't pull on anything, and it sits nicely. And half of the class had never done that before, and they've been knitting for all these years. And I think is what you said, you've been knitting the same thing over and over again for 60 years. And so I was thrilled that I was able to teach them anything about knitting, because they've been so experienced. But it's, I think we get into habits of doing certain things over and over, and we stay in our comfort zone. So it is interesting, when we can push one another or just try different things, and because we're always learning.
And that's the thing about what when you started the Cabin Boy Knits, and what we like to do, and what we're trying to do as well is, people have an idea of what natural dyes should be and they look like, and they all think it's all pale, it's all, what do you call it, pastels, and it's all going to fade and wash away. And that's what we're trying to get away from. That, if you do the proper techniques, you think about, like, you go back in the history, and they still find fibers that were dyed thousands of years ago, still has the color. So it's sort of like, there's still people who don't believe, they won't believe, but it's like, if you just think about that for one moment. They found fibers from 2,000 years ago in a tomb, it still has its color. What do you think? They didn't dye that with, they didn't use some synthetic, red. And red, by the way, was the first synthetic color to replicate, because, remember red, it's like, wow, if you have anything red, even now, if you're going to wear a red dress to a wedding, do you know what I mean? Or to a funeral, red, right? That was the first color they replicated. So, you try to educate the people that we're saying, no, and some of the colors we've able to attain some pretty amazing colors that we look now, and I'm even so, my eye will go to some colors that I'm like, oh, is this naturally dyed? Because some of his colors have been so successfully vibrant that people are very surprised a lot that some of them are naturally dyed because of the vibrancy. So
well, do you feel like because of because you're doing all this research, right? Because you're learning history, because you're interested in it, do you feel like you have to come out as a expert in it? Do you feel like it's your role to educate the population about the history behind it? Do you feel like if you are challenged, you're panicking?
I definitely feel that it would be, I view it as our role to provide education around natural dyeing. Absolutely. Because there's such a misconception about it. And an example of that is, we were in Rhinebeck in 2019, and I could not believe the pushback I got from some people who were dyers. And I would say, well, I'm a natural dyer, and they would say, oh, you're polluting the environment, or you're not socially responsible, or and I'm just like, and the good thing is, it opens up an opportunity for conversation around it. But I was just thinking, my gosh, like, first of all, there's a lot of hostility there. But secondly,
We did consider that.
secondly, it's an opportunity to educate. And so because there's a lot of misconception, and you mentioned it earlier, there were some metals that were used that were toxic and harmful in natural dyeing, which we do not use. But it's an opportunity to educate. And I think I love educating people on natural dyeing.
Talking of the hostility of the some of the knitting community, do you ever feel like, because you are two guys, right, and because you're doing male retreats, like, do you ever feel that there is hostility toward men who knit? Do you feel like with you coming to festivals, do you ever get any unpleasant feedback, or people think it's super cool?
Yeah, so I would say 99% of the time, people are really fantastic to us and really supportive and great. Only one time, I was actually teaching a class, and someone was raising an issue, an item, because there was a discussion. The class was talking about it, and they basically said, it's a lot easier for males to excel in the knitting world than it is for females, and so, which was an interesting comment. And I think if you look at the number of teachers, you could argue that there are more male teachers in some of the festivals when you look at the percentage as a percentage of male knitters out there. So I think that was a fair comment. But I do think that it's very healthy to have a diversity of perspectives, and a diversity not only in gender, but also in background as well. And because it really, that's what we want to see. That's what we want to see. We want to hear from all different voices in terms of knitting anything or teaching. And I think it's incredibly healthy to have that.
Do you feel like it's luck? Do you feel like you just were lucky to get where you are? Do you feel like you were in the right place at the right time? Do you feel it's like advantage because you are two very good looking guys? Like, where do you see that? Like, how much of it is super hard work, like a lot of educating yourself and like a lot of trial and error, and where is the luck comes in?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the compliment.
I don't know.
I would say that I don't think it's luck. We do so much research, and I do so much outreach to people, and we care about the community a lot, and we are very active. We're not passive at all. And what I mean by that is I'm constantly networking with people, and because I love building community. And we've been extremely active in the wool industry in Canada, with the Upper Canada Fibre Shed, connecting with mills, connecting with farmers. So that's always top of mind. I could sit back, if I were to sit back and just not do any of that stuff, sure, I would say it was lucky, but we have worked a lot. And it's something we love to do. I think it's important, to foster a community of fiber people who love fiber. So I'm always interested in that. I do think, and because we make these networks, or we're networking with all of these people, opportunities pop up. And so I think if we hadn't done the groundwork for that, these opportunities wouldn't come up. And a perfect example of that is last year we did filmed an episode with the ASAP Science guys. And that was huge for us. I mean, they have 10 million subscribers on YouTube. And it was, they found out about us through people that I knew on Upper Canada Fibre Shed and
one woman in particular, and they were looking to do a garment with like a knit garment naturally dyed, and the woman said, "Oh, I know someone, Cowboy Knits," and they reached out to Christopher. So it is about the community and networking and all of that. And it's interesting because where we try to educate the people as well, and you go back in history and you talk about history and male knitters, and even people that used to do the dyeing and all that, it was like hundreds of years ago where you would apprentice. It would be an apprenticeship, but it was all men, and all of the anything to do with knitting and creating and garments and all of that would have been men, and then men who knitted during war times and all of that. There were a lot of men who knit, and then it just became everyone will say the same thing all of a sudden. How did it end up just being, you think knitting and you think it's the old grandmothers in rocking chairs knitting from way back when? And then one thing that I'm glad you asked that question, because I have to say that like we say, we are just ourselves. This is us day and night. Like you meet people, and you know, people know who know us.
No, I
and
think
friends.
you're a little chattier in real life.
I am. I am subdued, because actually when we do the episodes, I try to kind of like, I think I don't want to be too over the top. I want to just kind of not be stupid. and it just gets, you know, it's me. But you know, we've attained what we have. Like, you know, when I started, you had about 700 subscribers.
Yeah.
Was that 500 or 700? And you know, then I joined in, and then we just have fun, and we love doing it. And we met so many people, and then it went from that to like 7,000 in a year, and to where we are now.
Right.
And you know, whatever it is, I think it's just us being us, and us, the chemistry. I've learned to knit more and more, and I really do. I'm not just going to say yet that I love it. I really like it, and I'm so impressed with the result. The process so far, I'm still on the fence about it. But it is relaxing. What he said is therapy and relaxing. But
It's maybe relaxing for you.
it's stressful. It's stressful for me, and it's stressful for him, because I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? But you know, the thing about appearances, you know, it's just, I don't know. I have an issue. Like, I did do work in front of the camera for many years. Never ever took it for granted. Never thought I'd be doing that, and I don't like to talk about it, because my experience with just appearances has not been a good thing. Going back in the past, it's not been good. It's been a very big negative challenge, and it still is to this day, because you know, you have people who I've said to me straight, and people, I don't want to get into that negative stuff, but people directly say, just think that, oh, just because you look like this. And I have this conversation with a very best friend of mine, because she's very attractive, and you get challenges just based on your looks and thinking people and preconceptions. And recently, you asked that question, it's very interesting, because recently we have a person that we know fairly well, who, you know, said specifically that the only reason that how did that go? The only reason that we're where we are in Republic is we're two guys, and that we're gay, and that, I don't know if the attractive thing, it's just because we're two gay guys, and if it's only because of that we're doing, but whatever, that's the only reason we're where we are. And I think that kind of really upset me and hurt me, because I think, well, I don't know where you would get that idea. It's like, I don't know, watch our program, read some of the commentary that blows our mind when we read some of the stuff. It's very emotional sometimes, because people get very close, and people say things that are absolutely incredible and wonderful, and share things with us, and we do the same. And so when you watch an episode, read some of the comments, and if those people out there who watch us say what they say, that's my judgment, not that, because I think we're more than just what you think we are and why we're successful.
Well, let me ask you about that whole YouTube journey, because I'm still like totally new. I'm about to, so your episode is basically like a couple episodes before I reach 1 year on Fiberchats. And it's been an incredible journey. And I met over 160 like in very interesting people, right? And that's the best thing for me about this whole thing. But what was it for you? Like, did you get subscribers at some point that you didn't understand why they're subscribing? Were you trying different things to see what's gonna work and what's not gonna work? Like, how was that journey for you?
I think to begin with, I just wanted to talk about wool, and I wanted to, so the very early ones, I wanted to just bring a different voice, or my voice to it, and talk about different things. And so I thought that, and I wanted to talk about things that I found interesting. And then when Jamie came through, I started looking at, I'm all about data and analytics and everything else. So then I got into that, and saw, you know, what's working, what's not working. My son was giving me tons of feedback. My dad was giving me feedback on what was working, who's successful. So it was quite hilarious. But that's very taxing. And I just thought, and I actually thought it was unhealthy for a while, because I was too much focused on the data and where viewers were coming from and whatnot. So I actually hid the number of subscribers for a while, and I needed to step back from it and say, what is this all about? Like, you know, I need to focus on dyeing, I need to focus on art, I need to focus on other things other than data, because that wasn't healthy. And so, and I'm much happier doing that. I do check occasionally, but not very often. But what I am interested in is our comments. I love people take their time to give you a comment. And so I think it's important for us to respond to it. And I love that. That's one of the things I love about the YouTube channel, is really seeing the comments that come in and seeing what people are interested in as well.
Well, the comments give you ideas of like what you should talk about the next time you do the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes they do. They will, because they'll say, "Have you thought about this?" or "Have you thought about this?" And the thing I love is that people are free with their comments. They do not hesitate to share comments to us or help us. I definitely feel that there are certain viewers who view us as needing help, and I mean that in a good way, like almost like we're their sons or something, because they're trying to help us. And I find that that's so wonderful and so charming as well. So it's really nice.
If any of our viewers want to help me, like I'm totally open for suggestions. If you want to send your dad and your son my way, like let them tell me how to improve myself.
I definitely will.
We just figure we just keep doing what we're doing, and we're having a good time, and however it goes. And even in the beginning when I started, I wasn't thinking of anything of any kind of numbers or any of that, because I don't have Instagram. I'm not that guy. And so we just do what we do, and then we're having a good time doing it. It gave us great inspiration. That's very inspirational, especially this, as everybody knows from home, it just worked out really well that we could get up and look forward to doing an episode, because we do laugh our heads off, and especially after he edits it. We have fun, and he edits it, and we see things I hadn't even seen, because he says, "I'll be talking like this," and he's saying things, and I'm focused on my history lesson. And when we watch it, oh my gosh, it's the funniest thing, because I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you said that." And it's funny, even though it might be rude, like, poking at, and vice versa. It just goes. And so as long as we're having a good time, we just keep doing what we're doing.
And then I don't include Jamie in the editing at all. So I will edit
on
my own,
anything.
and he'll only see it after I upload it to YouTube.
Yeah. So
I want to ask you like a question that I ask a lot of YouTubers. Who do you talk to? Like when you record your episode, who do you address? Who do you have in your mind?
What an interesting question. I would say, for me anyway, I feel like I'm talking to, I do a lot of public speaking, and so I'm talking to an audience, and so I feel like I'm talking to an audience. And so when I'm talking about topics, I just imagine that I'm talking to a room full of people, and that's who I'm talking to.
Jamie, who do you talk to?
at the beginning, and I don't even know exactly how I feel right when I'm doing it now, I have a hard time thinking, like, there's nobody there. We're not talking to anybody. There's nobody there who's watching. And then you realize, no, there are people watching. There are real people watching. And so I don't think of anybody in particular or people in particular, because as much as I'm as outgoing as I am, I can be very shy. So what happens is, when we're, like I said to Christopher, like, is this a live Zoom thing where there's other people? Because we've done that. And I get very, very nervous, and it's very strange when I know there's faces there. So with no faces there, it took me a hard time to get into a rhythm to be talking like we're talking to someone. And now that we see the comments and know there are people out there, then yeah, we realize, I guess, there are people who are watching and listening and learning from us. So I just want to try to do the best I can when I'm being informative and all of that, so that I say things that are going to be helpful to others, because the people are going to they pick up on everything. You realize they don't let you get away with anything. So they say comments sometimes out of the blue that are the smallest of things, and they'll say that, and I'll laugh so hard that out of all that 1 hour, they don't miss a thing. So I'm aware of that now. There are real people out there. And when we went to Nick City, that's why when we saw the real people and made it really real, and that was very emotional.
Well, what was your like biggest celebrity moment? Like when first time somebody came to you and were like, "Oh my God, it's you guys!" Like, tell me that story.
Oh my gosh, I have a funny one, I think, and it was I was at Vogue Knitting, and
oh yes,
And there were authors sitting, or people who knitted, big knitters who, and Nancy Marchand was there, and she was sitting beside Franklin Habit. And I know Franklin, I've been roommates with Franklin at retreats and whatnot, so I know, so I went up to talk to Franklin. I'm a huge Nancy fan as well. So I'm talking to Franklin, and Nancy looks over and she said, "Are you Cabin Boy Knits?" And I almost collapsed. I was.
Yeah. I mean, I'm working on Nancy, and I'm trying to convince her to come to my show, but she's in the middle of the moving from one house to another. So she sort of like told me maybe in the summer. So I'm hoping like I'm.
And you thought that was a big deal because you're with Franklin Habit.
Oh yeah, because I was with
Franklin Habit. You're like, what?
Right.
But that's Franklin Habit. And so yeah, you had that. I think. Well, for me, because I hadn't started, I was thinking about when we were at Rhinebeck, and but Knit City, there were some very, very amazing moments. I mean, oh my gosh, it's just like, you know, because it was so emotional and moving. And the one woman who came, she drove specifically how many hours from Virginia?
Oh my gosh.
Was it Virginia?
She drove from Virginia.
From Virginia to Canada just to come and see Cabin Boy Knits, and I still blows my mind. But at Rhinebeck, I was all about, there's all these special those special donuts at Rhinebeck that you line up down, and I'm like,
oh my gosh.
I'm not what? I've been a donut like addict since I'm like my teen years, like for real. And I'm like, I'm getting those donuts. I'm like, and so for a joke, I thought I'm just gonna go right to the front of the line. People don't know me because I wasn't even the other guy then. I was nobody because he was. So I'm like, hi, at the front of the line, hi. And then I said, oh, blah, blah, blah. I started chatting away, and the donuts are right there being made. But I could see what was happening because people were ordering like a dozen at a time for their friends. They're dropping off one at a time. So had this conversation. I was like, okay, what happens if, you know what? I'm gonna go grab that bag of donuts, and what are they gonna do? Kick me out of the park? I'll be kicked out, but I'll have my donuts. But I'm like, oh no, but Cabin Boy Knits. And then some woman said, was it that woman who said, wait a minute, Cabin Boy Knits? I said, well, yeah, he's over there. Like, it's just Christopher, it's not whatever. I said, yeah. She's like, oh my God, where is he? I said, well, he's over there. And remember the woman, they were at Rhinebeck, and she'd been watching him from, where was it again? Dubai.
Yeah,
Dubai. And that's when I was like, what? It's like, I've been watching you from Dubai, and but she's Canadian, but she's been living in Dubai and watching Cabin Boy Knits from Dubai. And there I am trying to figure out how to butt in line to steal some donuts. And then it's like, she recognizes the association. And that was kind of where it's like, people are
but we just had
from Dubai.
We just had a show at a gallery, and she knew all about the show.
Which was, it was the jock, and we did this jock strap show locally, which was all about knitted jock straps,
right.
And people to try on the jock straps in front of the mirror. And it was this very small art gallery over here. And she knew, she says the jock straps, and she knew, and I was like, this is strange. You're on this little machine right here, and someone around the world from Dubai is standing right there and goes, oh my God, there's Cabin Boy Knits. That's when I was like, and I'm not even on the show.
I will just say one thing. So you never answered about yourself really, but in terms of start. So I've got one about Jamie. Okay. So we were at a festival, and a woman, Jamie was on the cover of a few Harlequin romance books. And so there's a big Jamie fan that showed up to our booth, and she said that she lies in bed with her husband, and she has a book with Jamie on the cover and pretends it's Jamie.
True story. I was like, la, 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 la.
She was the sweetest, most charming woman. She was adorable.
Was she the one who worked at the home?
Yes,
as well.
Just adorable. Yeah, and but that's my Jamie story.
Well, I hope to meet you guys at Rhinebeck. I hope
that would be fantastic.
Yes.
I already booked my accommodations, so I'll try to find you there, and maybe we'll just share some donuts together.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
And if you see us before we see you, you make sure we say hello, because if you know how there's a lot of people, so if we spot you, we'll be hey. But if you see us first, then
we will find you.
Yeah, they'll find each other. Well, thank you so very much, both of you, for being my guests today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and let's meet at Rhinebeck.
That sounds great. And, I just wanted to thank you so much for what you're doing. I think you're bringing a view of the knitting world to so many people. I just want to thank you so much, and thanks for having us as well.
And I want to thank you too, because it's just
pleasure.
A wonderful way to spend this time with some laughing and some sharing of information, and the fact that you made that beautiful thing and you're 5 years into it, you're doing really well. So good for you. Thank you.
Thank you.